Sasson. In 1996, Eastman Kodak was worth $30 billion. It employed 145,000 people across the globe. Its name was synonymous with memory itself. Families kept their boxes of Kodak film in kitchen drawers. Hospitals used Kodak imaging. The US government used Kodak film in reconnaissance satellites. If you wanted to capture a moment in the 20th century, you almost certainly used Kodak to do it. 16 years later, Kodak filed for bankruptcy. Not because digital photography surprised them, not because they failed to see it coming. Kodak's own engineer built the first digital camera inside a Kodak lab in 1975. The question is not whether Kodak knew. The question is why knowing was not enough. George Eastman was not a chemist by training. He was a bank clerk in Rochester, New York, who became obsessed with a practical problem. Photography in the 1870s was a process for specialists. Glass plates, toxic chemicals, heavy equipment. You needed a wagon to carry it all. Eastman believed that was wrong. Photography should belong to everyone. By 1880, he had patented a dry plate process. By 1888, he had introduced the Kodak camera, a simple box loaded with enough film for 100 exposures. The marketing line was direct. You press the button, we do the rest. Customers mailed the entire camera back to Kodak. Kodak developed the film, reloaded the camera, and sent it home. Eastman had not just built a camera, he had built a system, and he owned every part of it. That system is the key to understanding everything that followed. Kodak's real product was not the camera. The camera was the entry point. The real product was the consumable. Film, chemicals, paper, processing. Sold again and again to the same customer for every photograph they ever took. This is what business analysts would later call a razor and blades model, though Kodak built it decades before the term existed. The camera created demand. The film created revenue. The processing created loyalty. Kodak controlled manufacturing, chemistry, distribution, and in many markets, the photo finishing labs themselves. The margins on film were exceptional. A roll of film that cost a fraction of a dollar to manufacture could command multiples of that at retail. By the middle of the 20th century, Kodak was not competing in photography. Kodak was photography. The flywheel accelerated through the post-war decades. American prosperity meant more families, more vacations, more milestones worth photographing. Baby booms produced baby pictures. Every wedding, every Christmas, every first day of school generated another roll of film. Kodak's marketing shaped that behavior. The Kodak Moment campaign did not just sell film. It told people which moments deserved to be remembered and implied that forgetting to capture them was a kind of loss. The company invested heavily in research and manufacturing infrastructure centered in Rochester. It expanded internationally. It diversified into industrial imaging, medical X-ray film, and government contracts. By the 1980s, Kodak was the kind of company that felt permanent. Rochester built its economy around it. Tens of thousands of workers built careers there. Suppliers, vendors, and local institutions organized around the assumption that Kodak would always be there. That assumption was not paranoia. It was entirely rational, for as long as the film model held. The numbers at the peak were extraordinary. In 1988, Kodak employed approximately 145,000 people worldwide. Its market share in US consumer film was estimated at 85 to 90%. Its brand recognition was global. In surveys of consumer brand awareness, Kodak consistently ranked among the most recognized names on Earth. The stock reached all-time highs in the mid-1990s. Market capitalization approached $30 billion. Analysts described it as a wide moat business, protected by manufacturing scale, brand loyalty, distribution depth, and the simple fact that the world ran on film. For anyone looking only at those numbers, Kodak looked indestructible. The cracks, as they almost always do, had already begun. In 1975, a 24-year-old Kodak engineer named Stephen Sasson built something in a company laboratory that his supervisors were not sure what to do with. It was a toaster-sized device that captured images without film, a digital camera, the first one. It took 23 seconds to record a single black and white image to a cassette tape. The resolution was 0.01 megapixels. When Sasson showed it to Kodak management, the reaction was not outright rejection. It was something more complicated. They understood what it was. They asked the right questions about image quality, about timelines, about when digital might become good enough for consumers. Their conclusion, by various accounts, was, not soon. Film quality was still far superior. The infrastructure required to make digital mainstream did not exist yet. The transition would take decades. That analysis was not unreasonable for 1975. The problem is what happened next. Kodak continued making the same calculation: protect the film business, delay the digital commitment, for the next 25 years. The crack was not the technology. The crack was structural. Kodak's business model made digital photography an existential threat, not an opportunity. Film margins were what funded everything. Every dollar shifted to digital was a dollar taken from the machine that paid for the factories, the workforce, the dividends, and the pensions. The incentive to delay was enormous, and so the delay continued. Segment 7. The fatal decisions. It would be inaccurate to identify one fatal decision. This was a pattern of decisions made under genuine pressure by rational actors that accumulated into catastrophe. Kodak did invest in digital. Throughout the 1990s, the company spent billions developing digital cameras, digital printing, and online photo services. In 1994, Kodak launched the Photo CD system, a product that let consumers store digital images from film on compact disc. It was ahead of its time and failed to gain traction. In 1996, Kodak launched the Advantix system, an entirely new film format, at the very moment digital was beginning its mass-market ascent. The timing has been widely described as a strategic miscalculation of the first order. By the late 1990s, Kodak was selling digital cameras. For a period, it was among the top-selling digital camera brands in the United States. But selling digital cameras meant cannibalizing the film rolls and processing revenues those cameras replaced. The margins were incomparable. A digital camera was a one-time hardware sale. Film was a subscription the customer never thought of as a subscription. The choices Kodak faced were genuinely difficult. Commit fully to digital and destroy your own margins before a competitor does, or defend film revenues as long as possible and invest in digital at the margins. Kodak attempted a middle path, full commitment to neither. When the transition accelerated faster than internal models predicted, driven by smartphones more than standalone cameras, there was no middle path left. The decline of consumer film was not gradual. It looked gradual until it was sudden. Film sales began eroding in the late 1990s. By the early 2000s, the erosion had become structural collapse. Digital camera adoption exploded. Then camera phones arrived. By 2007, the iPhone had demonstrated what a camera phone could be. People did not stop taking photographs. They took more photographs than ever. They simply stopped using film. Kodak's revenue fell sharply. The company went through successive rounds of layoffs. Rochester, which had organized itself around Kodak employment, faced a long economic contraction. Kodak restructured. It sold divisions. It attempted to pivot to commercial printing and document imaging. It reduced its workforce from 145,000 at peak to under 20,000 by the time of bankruptcy. The legacy costs, pensions, healthcare obligations built up across decades of employment were enormous relative to a shrinking revenue base. The patent portfolio, which many analysts initially valued between $2 and $3 billion, became a focal point. Kodak hoped those patents would fund a restructuring. Compare this to Fujifilm, Kodak's primary rival. Fujifilm faced the identical disruption. Fujifilm's response was aggressive diversification, far earlier, into pharmaceutical ingredients, cosmetics, optical films for LCD screens, and medical imaging systems. Fujifilm survived. Fujifilm today has a market capitalization that Kodak at bankruptcy could not have imagined. The difference was not that Fujifilm saw the future and Kodak did not. Both companies saw it. The difference was in how they responded to what they saw. On January 19, 2012, Eastman Kodak Company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in the United States Bankruptcy Court for the Southern District of New York. It was a company that had existed for 131 years. At filing, Kodak listed assets of approximately $5.1 billion and debts of approximately $6.8 billion. The patent portfolio, expected to be the primary vehicle for recovery, sold in 2013 for approximately $525 million, far below the estimates that had circulated during restructuring negotiations. Consumer film operations, the business that had built the empire, were wound down. Kodak emerged from bankruptcy in September 2013 as a fundamentally different company, a commercial imaging and printing business employing a fraction of its former workforce with none of its former cultural weight. Rochester, New York, absorbed an economic wound that took years to understand in full. Generations of workers had built careers at Kodak with the expectation of stability. Pension obligations became a contested issue in bankruptcy proceedings. The Kodak brand continued to be licensed for various consumer products, including cameras and film, though without the manufacturing infrastructure that once backed it. Perhaps unexpectedly, consumer film found a niche market among photographers who prefer its aesthetic qualities. Kodak film is still produced, in smaller volumes, for that market. The name survived. The empire did not. Stephen Sasson, the engineer who built the first digital camera in 1975, received the National Medal of Technology and Innovation from President Obama in 2009, while Kodak was still in business, though deep into its decline. He has spoken publicly about his invention and its reception on multiple occasions. The business mechanism at the center of Kodak's collapse is not unique to Kodak. It appears in industry after industry. It is called the innovator's dilemma, a term that Harvard Business School professor Clayton Christensen formalized, and that Kodak is perhaps the most studied example of. Here is the mechanism in plain terms. A dominant company's profitability depends on a high-margin product or service. A new technology emerges that threatens that product. Initially, the new technology is inferior, and its market is small. The rational decision, in the short term, is to protect the high-margin business and watch the new technology develop. The problem is that by the time the new technology is superior enough to take the mass market, which it eventually is, the dominant company has lost the years it needed to build competitive position in the new market. Every year of delay made sense in isolation. Accumulated, those years of delay were fatal. Kodak did not fail because it was ignorant or corrupt or run by fools. It failed because its incentive structure made the rational short-term decision the wrong long-term one, and because the transition happened faster than its internal models allowed for. The photograph that killed Kodak was not any one photograph. It was every photograph that no longer needed film. End card. Every empire looks permanent at the top. The cracks usually begin earlier.